Welcome to the Pathways to Profitability podcast, personal tales of business success, where we hear local business owners' personal stories of their trials and tribulations that got them to where they are today. Here's your host, Cheryl Mucha, CEO of CFO Your Way.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. Welcome to Pathways to Profitability podcast. Our guest today is Mark Ridley from GreenShootsFX Corporate Payments. Mark, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today.
I'm glad you're here. This is going to be a great conversation. So Mark, just tell our audience a little bit about yourself, a little bit how you started the company.
So, so almost 30 years in financial services, 7 banks that I'd worked at, global banks on across 2 continents. And I'll try and be as professional about this as I can, but often, certainly in the larger banks, I felt like we incentivized bad behavior. And my business partner and I decided that we want to be part of the problem anymore, and we wanted to be part of the solution. So we wanted to offer US-based businesses great pricing, good products, but really a good level of education when it came to moving money internationally. When anybody sets up a business, there's usually a laundry list of things that you'll check off, and typically,
Absolutely.
like banking is one of those components. But everything within banking, which is lending, your payroll, and everything else, and international money movement, that all goes under one kind of lump.
Right.
Whereas we think that you should actually peel that out and look at specific components of that, because without realizing it, moving money internationally can be incredibly expensive, and you don't see it and you don't know it. And so you end up losing out what could be. We've got plenty of examples where one company in particular, we saved them just shy of $1 million in international money movement. So you think you got it under control, and that's the biggest thing we hear is, "Oh, I'm happy with my bank." You're like, yeah, but give us 20 minutes and we'll save you a few bucks. So we just wanted to branch out on our own and provide that level of service and education.
So is that, like you say, it costs so much? Is that in hidden fees, or is that in the ability to negotiate or find better transaction rates?
You know, it's a little bit of all of that. Here in the States, the biggest thing that we find are that any importer is typically paying a vendor in US dollars and not paying in the currency of the vendor. And what what companies don't realize is, in most cases, you're overpaying between 4 and 7% by paying in US dollars. So the kind of simple math, if you will, is we say, look, if you're paying vendors in dollars, you're overpaying by 5%. If you are paying in a currency, which is the right thing to do and is considered to be best practice, and you're using a bank to do it, more often than not, you're overpaying by anything from 1.5% to 2%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're a small business and you're paying $100,000, well, wouldn't it be nicer to pay $98,000 or $95,000?
It's a definite ding to the bottom line.
It helps, and it's funny. Like, we have one client that we say, and I don't mean to laugh, and I'm going to take that little smile back, but like, we save them about $100 a month, and they are so grateful for that. And yet we spoke to $1 billion company where we could save them $5 million a year, and they just shrugged their shoulders and said, that's a chairman's lunch. Like, that doesn't even move the needle in our place.
Wow.
So it's 5 million to someone is nothing, and $100 to someone else is a lot of money. But typically we end up saving, I'd say on average we're probably saving a couple of few $100,000 a year.
Right. Yeah, but you talk about the small business versus a large business. The small business, it's coming right out of the owner's pocket, so they're feeling it, and they feel that additional $100 a month. Whereas the big corporate structure, there's so many hands in the pot, they're not feeling it.
No, exactly right. And to be fair, the guy that, and I've gotten to know him quite well, that guy who referenced the 5 million, he has a personal spend, like his team, I say he has a personal spend. He's head of procurement. His budget is $2.5 billion a year.
Wow.
So 5 million off of 2.5 is not, but to be fair to he himself, he said, look, that to me is a lot of money. And if I can save it, I will. But
Right.
we have so many other projects and so many other things in the way that, we could save $10 million doing something else. I think he actually said, if we want to save $5 million, won't put any pens out on the stand at our next conference. So that just give you an idea of
Right.
like the silly amount of money they're spending. But
So
yeah, so usually it's. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Usually it's what?
So I was going to say, so usually it's not so much. Well, I suppose it is hidden fees to a certain degree. It's a hidden markup in the foreign exchange if you are using a bank.
Okay. So you talked a little bit about the kind of impetus for starting the business. Was there something else in your prior experiences that said, I want to be an entrepreneur, like this is my next step?
I think you need my wife here for that one. Because she had been saying for about 10 years, you need to do that. You need to go out on your own. You need to. And at the time, I can remember just staying and thinking, but I don't know what going out on your own looks like. I don't know what the world needs. And I probably did know it, but when you're working for corporate America, when you are working in a global institution, when you, not to be too crass about it, but when you pick up a decent compensation, you become addicted to that. And I think you bury your head in the sand a little bit and pretend everything's all okay. So I had my wife like really pushing and encouraging and saying, look, you should really be doing something. You should really go out on your own. And then honestly, I found myself in an institution where, I was working with some really great individuals, but just collectively, I just couldn't get behind the direction anymore. And so my business partner and I had been, if you will, moaning about that for quite some time. He was in a different organization. And over a pint, we said, look, we either do something about it or we just shut up and take the paycheck and just remain in the status that we're at. And so we just said, let's do it. But I did have I can remember it well. It's my, what I call my JFK moment, which is, where you were when it happened. And I was on business in Chicago, and my wife, God love her, she's very like, look, don't worry about phoning me. Just send me a text. Let me know wherever, let me know you're safe, et cetera, et cetera. You're busy, you go away, you do your thing. I'm busy, I'm doing my thing. So I'm in my hotel and my phone rings and it's my wife. And so that's never a good sign. And the fact that it was a FaceTime, and she vehemently hates this kind of thing, like video conferencing, that whole night, she absolutely hates it. So the fact that she's calling me and it's FaceTime, I'm like, right, this is not a good thing. And
I better answer, right?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I don't even have to have it on ring. Like I can sense my wife calling me.
Right.
I have to have that level of intuitiveness. But he was my son, and so he's 9 now, so he would have been 6 at the time, coming up 7. And he was in pieces. He was crying, and he'd never been like that when I'd been away. And that for me was a defining moment. I'm like, right, okay, I'm really upsetting my family now. And I probably always was, but now it's visible to me and it's clear to me I'm upsetting my family now. And I don't think that it's worth it for what I get out of the career that I'm currently in or the people that I'm working with. So that was it. And I made the commitment. I wanted to get out, and that kind of like coincided with connecting with my now business partner, and the stars aligned. The stars aligned within like 2 or 3 months, I think it was.
Typically they do. Yeah. When I know for myself and so many other entrepreneurs that I speak to, it's that moment, like, and I always say you need to have had the experiences that you've had in order to be able to take that giant step forward and become an entrepreneur. So it's that defining moment, that aha, or
Yeah.
that I'm finally ready. I'm finally, what, mentally, physically, financially, whatever it is, you're ready to take that jump. And usually 9 times out of
Yeah.
10 for an entrepreneur, once we take that jump, you never look back.
You know, it's funny. It's always an interesting phrase that you never look back. I do look back, but with positivity. So,
Okay.
when I do look back on it, I then kick myself and think you should have listened to your wife 10 years ago. But
Yeah,
to
but
be
10 years
fair,
ago, you weren't ready.
exactly, I wasn't, and I can happily and easily admit that to myself as well. I don't think I don't think I had the confidence. I don't think I
Right.
would have had the support network necessarily
And,
around me,
and just the additional
um,
experience you got in those 10
and
years.
the additional experience. Exactly that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think I did need to have that. I needed that push. I
Right.
don't think I was ready to yeah, I suppose there's a difference between a push and a jump.
Right.
To some, it looks like I jumped, but I think I did need
It
that
was a
extra
leap.
little bit
It
of
wasn't a
yeah,
it was
yeah,
a leap,
kind of,
not a jump or a
kind of
push.
stumbled and then fell. I think is the way that I would probably describe it. Yeah, slipped.
Hey, we all do. That's part of the journey. And
Right,
we
right.
take that step, that leap, and some of us figure it out afterwards. Like, you can prepare and you can rely on your network and the people around you and all your experiences. But being an
Yeah,
entrepreneur, there's so many things that you can't prepare for because they just come up, they just happen, they're just there.
yeah. Well,
But
so I also felt like in the previous like in probably the last 4 years, before starting up Green Shoots, I felt like I was
Mhm.
stagnating. I felt like I was kind of like, I suppose stuck is kind of like it's probably a good descriptor, but um, I felt at that stage I put in so many good years of really trying to get ahead of the curve into, I suppose, being well educated in what I do for a living, understanding technology, understanding the markets, etc., etc. And I just felt I was stagnating. I felt I was really standing still in the world, and everybody was passing me by. And then what I've learned in the last 2.5 years since kicking off GreenShootsFX is phenomenal. Not just about like re-educating myself in the financial ways, but just like building a business. I've always had that luxury. Well, there's a few things, right? I've had that luxury of having a large bank's logo on my business card, right? So that immediately opens doors
Mhm.
straight away. I have marketing departments with scores and scores of individuals that are supporting our business, that are writing our press releases, that are creating the marketing materials, that I have a product management team that are constantly developing, and so now you're doing all that yourself. So you're wearing, you are your you are your own head of HR, your head of operations, your head of marketing, your head of
Finance.
sales, head of finance. Exactly. Yeah. And I'm still sitting here like on a kind of a Saturday afternoon doing the books, making sure that things are balancing up, making sure that the income's right, making sure that we're paying our
Right.
commissions out right. So and I know that there's a more automated way of doing certain things, but there's a little bit of me that likes the old school pen and paper. I do.
Right.
It's around here somewhere. I do use an electronic notepad, so I am moving slowly into the 18th century. But I do like a pad. I love to make lists,
Yeah, me
and I
too.
did, not to
There's
go
nothing
too far
like
off
a
topic.
pen
I
and
did see
paper.
this. So I have a remarkable, which is the electronic notepad, and
Uh-huh.
there is that look and feel of a pad to it. So
Mhm.
I really like getting into that. But I did see somebody had put out a meme or a short on LinkedIn that said, was it high performing individuals don't make lists. And I think as I was looking at that at the corner of my eye, I was on, like, writing out number 9 on my list. I'm like, oh, well, that's
But there's
that's
nothing more
encouraging. Yeah,
there's nothing more
that's encouraging.
satisfying than taking the list and going like this and
Right.
scribbling something off.
Exactly. That is it. That is exactly it. Just like putting that line through it and failing. And I also feel that if my list gets down to like less than like a half a dozen things, I'm starting to panic. Like, it's like, well, there's nothing left to do. Like, is this the end? Is it over? Is the ride finished? So
As soon as you have that thought, there's something to add to the list, right?
Oh yeah. You turn to your email and there's always something that's happening out there. So yeah.
So tell us a little bit about like who your target market is, what your ideal client looks like.
So this is part of the learning journey. When I was asked that question on day one, or I say day one, like day one of starting to build, and specifically, like I've got 3 or 4 friends of mine that are in marketing, and they would ask me the same question, and I would just put my arms out and say, everybody's that target. Yeah. And they're like, no, it doesn't work that way, dude. Like segment, focus, target. So I'm like, that's very difficult, because I said, I don't want to like pick the wrong industry. And they're like, no, it doesn't work. So I would say, like, broad strokes, first and foremost, anybody that is moving money internationally, and that could be somebody who is importing, a business that's importing and paying global vendors. It could be, and we've had this once or twice, a purely domestic US-based company who sources goods, raw materials domestically in the US, manufactures here and sells here, but every 5 years they have to buy a new machine to manufacture those widgets, which they do from Italy. So it's a one-off kind of like capital payment, if you will, versus our importers who are making regular payments like almost every month or every other month. And then we have a couple of interesting clients who import technology, if you will. I suppose that's the way I'll describe it. But they pay SaaS fees to a technology company in the UK each month. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a movement of doesn't have to be a movement of goods. And then anyone that's exporting as well. So not just importers. We help exporters collect more US dollars on their global sales than they would do if they were using a bank to do that. And again, many exporters here in the US want to invoice and quote their global clients in US dollars, thinking, well, that's the best way, right? Because I'm a US based company and therefore I want to collect US dollars. But I see that, I do see that, logic from a CFO's perspective. But if you're a sales guy and you're quoting a German buyer in US dollars, you're going to be frustrated that almost 9 times out of 10 they're going to say thanks, but you're too expensive, or thanks, we're not really interested. And you just put that down to being, well, I'm just too expensive. But the reason why you're expensive is when they go to their bank and they figure out what that's going to be in euro, you're then too expensive. But if you go to them with a euro quote, you're taking the foreign exchange out of their equation and you're making yourself more attractive. Also, you're reducing by default by quoting in their currency. So, right here, right now, exports are, imports for German buyers, if you will, are really expensive if you're quoting US dollars. And so 3 months ago when they accepted the price, they could afford it. Now when they come to pay for it, with the euro being much weaker, it becomes more expensive. And so they might shrug their shoulders and say, look, I don't care, it's on the back of a ship right now, but I'm just not paying for it. So we help reduce risk as well.
Right. How about global organizations that are moving money from one location to another? Is that a situation too that would be beneficial?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if they're just moving money, like intra-company money movements, if there's intra-company money movement, there's more likely also going to be some kind of other global component to that as well. So there will be a level of import-export collection payment, if you will. But yeah, absolutely. We we were primarily focused on US based and Canadian based, and actually we can onboard clients in Mexico as well. But we were largely US and Canadian focused, just because of the kind of level of client service, if you will, that we could provide. So if, as we've seen in the last kind of like in the last week specifically with dollar sterling, dollar euro, in fact dollar most currencies, like there's been a big shift. Like in a day there could be a shift in currency prices, and so we send out alerts and we pick up the phone and we talk to clients and say, look, we know that you typically like to buy euros at this time of the month, but we still feel like there's a little bit more room to wait, so don't buy today, hold off, give it another week or so. So that's kind of a value add that we could bring. Now, we can onboard businesses in Australia and in New Zealand and in Hong Kong, and we can still give them the product and we could still give them the risk management tools that they're probably not getting from their banks. But that extra mile of picking up the phone when a currency is moving in a particular direction, they're going to know about it 16 hours before we do. So I don't feel like we're really adding that much to them. But that being said, and making a short story long, we do have one or two companies where they have international subsidiaries, and we support money movement literally backwards and forwards between the two. Usually profit is moving from one to the other.
Yeah, but even in a situation where it's a company in another country, to have you watching the fluctuation and being knowledgeable in the markets and being able to give them the heads up, that takes that whole responsibility, that whole I don't want to call it the risk, but just watching the market part of it off their plate. So to me, it would make sense to have someone else who's knowledgeable in that area take care of that.
Right, and so that's a really good point, and also comes back to the value add that I feel that we bring, right? Especially if you're a smaller business, and I referenced just now, like I'm the COO, I'm the head of marketing, and there are many small businesses that operate in the same way. Even if you've got like 5, 10, 15 individuals, you're still doing everything, and so you don't want to be doing is like looking at currency prices. Well, first and foremost, you're probably not even thinking that you should be looking at currency prices, which is the reason why you're not.
We have to pay this bill today, right?
Right. It's that, you're doing that, but it's more, but they're more, the focus are like, we've got to manufacture these goods and we've got to get them out on the back of a truck, and we've got to worry about all the other supply chain related issues that are going on out there, right here, right now. So, like giving that over to someone like us who could say, yeah, look, you just carry on manufacturing your widgets. You just make sure it gets on the back of the truck. We will take care of the risk. We will keep an eye on the markets for you. And we also have tools that can do that as well. So clients can get they can get automated alerts on certain prices if that's what they're looking for. So then they know that they could start paying a bit more attention to it. But if there's a material movement, then we're all over that. We will just ping out broadcasts to clients who are interested in specific currencies. And if it's a big movement and if it's a decent sized client where we know it's going to be quite impactful, then we'll naturally pick up the phone. But it's that's so I think that also comes back to one of the reasons why we started the company. Your bank relationship manager is probably not getting together with you on a regular basis to talk about a specific currency related international payment capability. You might be getting together with them like once a quarter to talk about payroll or a new loan facility or a change in interest rates. And what can happen? What can the bank do for you with regards to resetting rates or resetting loans? So it might sound a little bit flippant, but we often say, look, if you've got a headache, you don't go and see a mechanic. Well, unless your mechanic is your PCP, but like you would go and see a specialist, right? So if you got to move money internationally, don't go and see a generalist, go and see a specialist.
Right.
Like for me, and again, I come from the inside, right? So I know how banks operate, and I know their little tricks, and I know what they get up to, and all this kind of stuff. But for me, a bank is nothing more now than a receptacle to hold money, and I don't actually need a bank to do that either. Like, if I really wanted to, I could hold everything on my Starbucks card if I really wanted to. But it's just nothing more than a receptacle to hold money, right? My mortgage is over there. My life insurance is with a different company. Like, I move money. Actually, I move money with myself over here. My credit card is over here. This is not the 1950s in the UK where you went to the bank and your
get
bank
a bag of money.
Exactly, right? And the bank gave you everything. Like, now you can get financial services from non-financial companies, if you will. If you will. So, so we're trying to encourage US businesses to think a little bit outside of their comfort zone. But unfortunately, what we find here, and I don't mean to sound derogatory when I say this, but what we're finding is people are willing to knowingly overpay if it means they don't have to step outside their comfort zone. I can't tell you how many businesses I've spoken to where they show me what they pay on a monthly basis, and I can come at them and say, look, this is easily 50 grand a month that you're going to save. And they go away and they'll come back and they say, Mark, I've just spoken to one of our advisors, or I've just spoken to the CEO, and we've been doing this for 40 years now, so we know a thing or two, so we're going to carry on doing it this way. I'm like, 40 years of doing it wrong doesn't make it right. So, but that's your choice. And by the way, there's 20,000 other businesses that are doing it wrong that need our help as well. So you carry on doing what you do.
Think about it, 40 years times whatever, $50,000 a month is a big chunk of cash.
It adds up. It adds up. I mean, referencing earlier on that our biggest client, the biggest saving that we managed to get for a company was, I think it was about, I'd say it's probably about $950,000. I think it was something like that. They were using a mainstream bank, and they ended up going back to their bank and saying, hey, we can get this price from GreenShootsFX. Like, what can you do something about that? And I ended up speaking to them, and I said, can I guess how that conversation went? And she was like, yeah. Like, I said, so you phoned the bank and they said, oh no, that's a system error. You shouldn't be on that pricing. You're a premier client. You should be on our premier. She's like, yeah, how did you know? I'm like, I kind of heard it 20 times a day from my colleagues, and systems are usually pretty good and pretty accurate. And I can also tell you that individual probably has 100 other clients, and not one phone call did she make that day. So it just drives me nuts a little bit. And I'm not disparaging banks in any way, shape, or form. It's just, it's a personal preference, and mine is.
And it's education too. It's education and trust, and building trust, because again, everyone is bank, and companies that are dealing international are the big banks, using all the big banks. They're not using your small local bank, and that's just kind of the mentality.
Right. And so I probably should have carried it at the very beginning. It's my experience in the large banks that I've been at, but I've met probably as part of my role in the banks were my client, and the teams that I'd managed, other banks were our clients. So people don't realize that banks are actually often selling products to each other that then get downsold to the regional institutions. So I probably met about 300 banks in North America. And I fundamentally and 100% buy into community and regional banks. I love community and regional banks.
Why?
Because they at least try and do something right. They're not
and they pick up the phone.
Incentivized to do the wrong thing. So again,
and they pick up the phone.
You can pick up the phone. I love, so Margie, my customer service officer here at Coastal Heritage Bank. It's when we came to the US 7 years ago, and they were 5 branches, I think, of 50 people. Like my first branch, when I joined NatWest Bank back in the early 90s, we had 55 people in the branch.
Right.
So like when she says 50 people, I'm like, that's a big branch. I wasn't, oh, no, that's the whole company.
That's fine.
Oh, okay. but so we actually, we play a role with the community bank. So we help them retain their clients, because more often than not, their client starts to grow, becomes slightly bigger than mum and pop,
Right.
goes to the
Needs
bank,
more.
says, can I, exactly. And the bank can't either give them foreign exchange payments because they just don't have that capability, or
Right.
they can't get the right price. They can't get the right margin. And so that customer, and we see it time and time and time again, we have these conversations with banks like almost weekly, then walks up the road to Wells Fargo or a JP Morgan
Right.
or a Bank of America, who say, yeah, look, I can give you the price, but you're going to have to move all of your business,
Right.
because I'm not doing just one payment a month. And so we've had instances where regional banks, community banks have lost like $200,000-$300,000 worth of revenue. They lose their deposits, they lose the loan income, they lose the transaction banking, just because they couldn't offer a good foreign exchange price. So we have referral partner arrangements with regional banks, so that when they're in that situation again, then yeah, exactly, they can pass that client over to us. And I think only a few times have we come across prospects who are using a regional bank, and like I hate taking that business. And so more often than not, I'll probably know somebody in that institution, and I will give them a bit of a heads up and say, look, I think you need to proactively reach out and do something about the pricing. If some, like more often than not, we're taking business from like PayPal. People who use PayPal, my God, like you're getting absolutely hammered. Like, so PayPal, yeah, and it's usually the top four kind of banks in the US. That's where the pricing is usually not so great. So yeah, I don't take business from regional and community banks.
Right. You partner with them. It makes sense.
Yeah, we want to partner with them. But
you're
often,
providing something they're not.
Look, exactly, yeah. And so, and again, what many individuals don't realize, or what many businesses don't realize, if you walk into, like if I walk into Coastal Heritage Bank, for example, and look for a foreign exchange price, that's not coming from them. That's coming from a bigger bank that provides that to them, that provides that to the, and so it's usually the bigger bank. And that was my world, right? That's when I said banks were my client. So that's what we did. We were the bigger bank bullies, if you will, talking to other regional banks and saying, look, you need to move money internationally. You need to enter into trade finance. You need whatever it might be on the international scheme. You're not going to build that infrastructure. And so you're going to have to use a bank like us. Oh, and by the way, our price is X, and it ain't shifting from X. So if you want it, take it. If you don't want it, tough. And I don't like that mentality. So another kind of reason why we wanted to jump ship. So many businesses don't realize that if they can't get the right price from their local bank, it's not because their local bank is necessarily trying to hose them on price. It's because they themselves have high fees to pay to a much larger correspondent bank, as we call it. So that's why we try and help out the small institution.
So I just real quickly, I want to just ask you this question. So you mentioned about being away in the aha moment to become an entrepreneur with your son. How's work-life balance now that you're out on your own, and how do you find that balance and running the business and having family time?
I would say I'm great. My wife might differ.
I have to meet this wife.
She's a superhuman. She is a superhuman. Well, so for 4 years prior, I had a based at home role anyway, North America for a bank, and but I was on the road a lot, like a ton. So I had people across the US, and we had clients across the US. So I was always on the road. But the nice thing about it was that when I was home, I felt like I was present. So we had breakfast, we had dinner, which was great. Now, and coinciding with COVID, and people being more receptive to having video calls rather than
Right.
actual face-to-face meetings.
Right.
I think it's made our lives just that much easier. I don't have to be on the road so much. And businesses also don't necessarily want you disrupting their day for a couple of hours, and them having to sweep out an office and make you cups of tea. So jumping on a call for 30 minutes is but still having getting that connection is great. So I feel like I have it okay. Like I have a rule, 5:30 p.m. That's it. I'm out of the office.
And that's a great rule to have. I mean, we have to, especially working in our homes, we have to put those parameters on ourselves.
I think so. Then I'm going to follow that with a but. I'm usually back down here again about 9 p.m. when family are all tucked up in bed, and my wife's like, right, I'm going to go and do my art stuff, or I'm going to have an early night. And I'm like, okay. Now, instead of picking up a book and relaxing, I'm straight back into the office, and I'm usually here to about 2 a.m. And my wife says, like, what are you doing? Like, do you need to be doing stuff? Like, how can it be that busy? I'm like, you just make yourself busy. So
and it's not necessarily dealing with clients at the time. It's doing the accounting, it's doing the marketing, it's doing all those other things.
It's mostly that. Exactly that. Yeah, it's mostly marketing. From a client service perspective, from a problem perspective, touch wood, like we don't have any issues. Like our technology and our software, before somebody puts a payment in, it validates that the bank you're paying to is a valid bank, that it exists. So it's unless somebody's given you really bad information, and they've given you like a live bank, but they've given you the wrong information at that bank, then most of the time payments go through like super fast. And so we haven't had, and again, I'm going to touch wood, any payments that bounce back. I've not had an email that's come in and said, hey, my beneficiary's claiming non-receipt. So it's it's all very intuitive. And the way that payment systems move these days in local clearing systems and payment systems, money moves pretty fast. So before you know it, it's actually in the beneficiary's account.
Right. And if they're repetitive payments, same vendor, same. Yeah,
exactly that. Right. And so the system warehouses the template, if you will. So it's just a case of change the reference, change the value date, and change the amount, and away you go. And actually, on that note, and I think I should have it to hand. I think it might be next week's blog, if not the weeks after. Actually talks about updating beneficiary payment instructions, i.e., I've seen fraud hundreds of times over the last 30 years where you receive that email from your vendor that says, oh yeah, exactly, yeah, can you just update our bank details? Exactly that. Yeah. So always pick up the phone, validate. And even if you're picking up the phone and validating, we say always pick up the phone and validate again, because if it's a disgruntled employee that you knew that's moved out, then naturally you're going to pick up the phone to them and they're going to answer, and everything's going to be okay. Right? So
Great,
so
great advice. Yeah, we see it all the time. All the time.
You would do, right? Yeah, in your world as well. So even just on the domestic side, not just international. So yeah, it's but yeah, no, I think
I'm sorry, we've even seen it now with payroll, with direct deposit. It's it's scary. Like there's so much creativity out there to do the wrong thing.
Right, exactly that. Yeah. And unfortunately, there are far too many individuals out there that want to do the wrong thing. But thankfully, there are way more individuals out there that want to do the right thing. So we thank those people.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed our conversation, and so much great information for our audience. Best way to get in touch with you?
Well, you can either email me directly, which is mark.ridley@greenshootsfx.com, you can connect with us through our website, which is GreenShootsFX.com. We will be actually relaunching our website hopefully in the next couple of months. We've got a nice new design coming out. And then, of course, following us.
Right?
Say again, sorry.
That's your marketing hat, your new website, right?
Well, I'd like to take some creativity some creative license from that, but no, I've got some very good friends that do some very good stuff. So, it's all, I suppose, it is a journey. And when we not to go too far off topic and again making a short story long, but like when we launched, I remember saying, "This is awesome," like because it's mine or it's ours, like
right.
Awesome. And I was involved in it, and even the designer was like, "Dude, you'll be changing this in about 6 months." No way, this is fantastic. And here we are 2 years later, and he's absolutely right. So
looking forward to seeing it. And again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
Totally enjoyed our conversation. So to our audience, thank you so much for tuning in to Pathways to Profitability podcast. You can see all of our episodes at pathwaystoprofitability.com. Check it out. Listen in to all of our prior episodes. And thank you so much. Have a beautiful day.
That's it for today's episode of Pathways to Profitability. Remember to ask yourself, where can I pay my success forward today?